Hello, Gary.
Okay.
Good one today.
Yeah, good one. A guy who I'm sure is going to have so much to say.
So much. I've already, actually, I've sent a message this morning to a dear old Rockonteur who's very closely connected, who sent me a spiel of stuff to mention to him.
Yeah. I mean, this is a guy who started in familiar territory up in Manchester in the mid-70s with certain gigs that have become infamous, and is now kind of one of the bands ruling America.
Yeah, he ticks so many Rockonteurs boxes.
So no time today for quick stories between you and me, niceties, and because I think this will be a long one. So let's get him on.
Welcome to the Rockonteurs.
Billy, thanks for coming on.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
Yeah, there seems to be so many connections between your story and a lot of other people we've had on Rockonteurs that it's a good gap that you're going to fill.
Oh, no, a massive gap. Massive, or because there's going to be... Actually, what's relevant? Can I start just by saying where you and I first met?
Okay, sure.
Which was... funny, I had a memory. I always thought it was Thanksgiving, but it wasn't. It was Labor Day, 1986. We spent the day together in LA at Andy Hewitt's house.
Absolutely.
Who was a promoter with... I was invited there by Tarquin Gotch, who's a producer of this podcast.
All right, yeah.
And I was in LA with my girlfriend because we'd been flown out for my girlfriend's 21st birthday as a present by one Johnny Marr.
Oh, wow.
Because the Smiths were playing in LA, and it was also a commiseration because I wasn't doing that tour, which I'd been meant to be doing.
Johnny's a very kind man.
I have a torrent of texts from Johnny as well this morning.
But do you remember meeting him? More's the point.
My memory of him is going to his flat in Notting Hill Gate about 3 a.m.
Right. That kind of memory, yeah.
Yeah. So, but I mean, Andy, I know. I'm getting to that age now where everything's a little bit of a blur.
Yeah.
I've got to be honest. You guys have been doing this podcast, so you probably had to refine your memories a little bit more. To like check.
Thank God for Google.
Yeah. You know what I mean? But it was a good time. I just went to Los Angeles in '88 for a while. London, I was starting to get into little bad habits. Socially at night in London, and I remember just thinking I don't necessarily know if this is a good thing, and I'd been spending more and more time in America with the Cult, and I met Steve Jones, whose name's probably popped up on this podcast once or twice.
We did him in this room.
Yeah, in this very chair.
Yes.
I'm honoured.
Yeah. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Was that like if you're trying to get away from certain habits?
Well, you get different kind of habits with Steve Jones. He was sober, and
he was good habits.
Well, he was sober. That was on the plus side. He just sounded very liberating. He showed up. We were in a studio, and he showed up. This is literally like a cliche. He had hair like Ted Nugent length. He was like completely fit. He had a Harley, red Harley with no seat, just had like a metal plate on it. He showed up. He'd been hanging out with Paul Simonon, who'd been living in LA or visiting. And he came to the studio and was just sort of hanging out. And I felt he was a bit like the mayor of Hollywood. Like he just... And we just sort of got friendly and just... It was easy. And then he would let me ride his bike. And I sort of bluffed that I was better than I was. And I was thinking...
You didn't wear a helmet in there?
No, well, that was the thing about at the time, California, to me, represented all this, like, freedom.
Yeah, on a steel horse I ride.
All that, it was, it was just like, there weren't any rules. Britain, I just felt like I was drowning in a sea of red tape, which probably hasn't changed. But I just felt like I went there and it was just a lot of fun. And I was at the age where fun was sort of my number one priority.
Yeah. But also musically.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so easy to find compatriots when you're there, isn't it?
Yeah. A lot of people were with us. It was really coincidental because the hair metal thing happened. And we never, nobody... in the Cult ever wore spandex, just as a disclaimer. I need to say that in public. However, we sort of coincided with that scene. But I never went to see any of those bands. I mean, I think I might have gone to that massive Monsters of Rock thing with Metallica and Van Halen in like 1989. But it wasn't like... We did a tour with Guns N' Roses. They kind of opened for us.
I was going to say, that's when things kind of changed. When it went from hair metal to a sort of like, because there was very much an English thing in LA, which was more more American rock than American rock. It's like you were kind of better at it than then, in that it wasn't spandex and it wasn't the hair. It was more of kind of the real deal.
Yeah,
You know what I
it
mean?
was a
Like
bit
Billy
more
Idol
rootsy.
and all you know. Because I think it's because you lot, it's because you had that punk past that gave you a kind of, I don't know, sort of superiority.
license.
A license, yeah.
They did. There was definitely a certain deference to bands with our kind of background, like, you know, and in America, and we did go to Los Angeles quite early on when we first went, because America was a bit slow for us. You know, our first album never came out there. They didn't quite get it. You know, we had some sniffs from record labels, and they showed up and did the whole thing, and nobody ever bit until we did the second album, and then Seymour Stein heard She Soul Sanctuary, and he actually flew to England. So I told Astrid, you better put your tight leather trousers on. Seymour's coming over. And we had dinner with Seymour, and we had a fantastic meal at the studio, and we were recording the Love album, and Seymour came over, and we were like, oh, we got to be on Sire. We have to be.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
and that was the deal. We've always been signed to Beggars Banquet as an English label, an indie label, but we did licenses with various people.
It's amazing how much, we've never really discussed this on the show, but it's amazing how much a label can give credibility to a band. I mean, you know, there are certain radio stations that won't play any of the artists on the, you know, top 3 or 5 labels.
Yeah,
You know,
of course.
If you're on Sire, you know,
Well,
already
I
got
should say
that
one person.
interest.
What's interesting is how Seymour Stein cuts across everything in terms of cool. It's everything. It's you. It's the Smiths. It's Talking Heads. It's Blondie. It's Madonna. It's you
And
know
he goes
how
back-
his kind of he
was a curator.
Absolutely. Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, we had a lot of. He was incredible in terms of, like, he'd tell you, like, made the tea on the B side of a Del Shannon single, or he was into bebop and all sorts of stuff. He was a fabulous, incredible guy. Incredible guy.
But at the same time, you know, you've got this English credibility. But, you know, if you look at the artwork on say, the Electric,
right.
you're going for the full kind of like, there's a sense of Americana about it, you know, and the West is on there. Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of Maximum Darkness, you know, that album by Man, you know.
There's a lot of weird, twisted stuff, ironically, with the cult. So, we started with the kind of as the death cult, and we were kind of from what you'd probably term gothic, positive punk, whatever those labels were about.
By the way, it wasn't until I started researching you that I'd never heard positive punk before.
It was a thing.
No,
It's
I've
a
never heard that.
terrible
Have you
name. It's a terrible
I know,
name.
No,
for a
I know.
genre.
I'm a bit ashamed I even brought it
And
up.
there's
but it was-
another name of something, actually, which is a band of yours, which is something odd. When We Go Back, which I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah.
Oh,
This is
okay.
good.
So
This
yeah,
is
great. Yeah.
So, and the thing in Britain was that we just felt, and me and Ian's opinion was that the punk rock thing had kind of infected the mentality of the journalists so much that by the time we started, there were all these rules and regulations about what you couldn't do. And I'm like, when I went to a punk gig, that was kind of the opposite of that. And, you know, so I felt that you can't have long hair. You can't say, well, maybe Led Zeppelin made the odd good record, or, you know, there were all these rules.
you know
No
what it was?
guitar solos, no.
The journalists were late to the party.
Yes.
Right? And also, they preferred McLaren
Yeah.
to the bands because
Yeah.
McLaren was more middle class, like they were.
Yeah.
There was a sense of, I get him. He's an intelligent, you know, and he's making the manifestos.
Yeah. Absolutely. It was, I mean, I get it, but it seemed to the music business, you know, the music press at that time was run out of 2 pubs in London, and if you didn't fit in, you were these weird northerners. You know, we felt that we were a bit outsidery. So when we got a bit of success, we were just we just jumped in with both feet in the deep end. You know, we really did some very broad strokes in terms of Electric, but we can get into all that with Rick Rubin and all that. It was
Well, actually, we're talking about. I like the one. Someone told me this. For Love, you actually wanted Steve Lillywhite to produce it,
true story. Yeah,
and you left. Was it a tape
Go
or
on,
a
tell the
note
story,
at the
Billy.
studio?
it's true.
Go on.
All right. So our management at the time were Ian Grant and Alan Edwards.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Okay. They managed Big Country. They were also friends with John Giddings, who I believe managed Steve Lillywhite. So being an up and coming young rock band, we thought, who'd you go to? And he was the guy. So Our management sent our first album and a live album, which we put out at the same time. That was our big thing. And it was a Post-it note, and it was left for Steve, and Steve Brown picked it up, who was another producer.
Wham's producer.
That's the thing. So me and Asprey met him, and we thought, this guy, we were just like, this is so mental that we got to meet this guy. And I don't know if you had the pleasure of Steve Brown's company.
I used to, yeah.
Yeah, so he was quite a character, and he had incredible pop sensibility.
Is he still around?
No, he died not so long ago. Sadly, but he just was. It was just such a weird happenstance. So the whole story of making the single "She Sells Sanctuary," which kind of changed everything for us, was that initially we wanted Steve Lillywhite, and so Steve
Which
Brown
makes sense, right?
Yeah, well, it's just a logical
Yeah.
move, right? He was producing U2, Simple Minds, everybody at that point. So that never happened. So we met Steve Brown, and we met him, and he was like, yeah, I know I produced Wham, and I've done all this dance funk music. I don't know who he did, whether it was like that era when Blue Rondo, and there was all that La Beetroot stuff.
Yeah.
And he
Maybe
was
did that. Yeah.
He was that guy. And we were like, this is mental. He said, but I did grow up engineering at Phonogram. And he said, I worked on Alex Harvey and Thin Lizzy. And I went, you're in. And we just did it honestly on some weird cantankerous.
Yeah, but also you were probably half thinking he might get us in the charts.
We were a little under pressure. I do remember having a meeting actually with somebody, and the first time they went, because all our contemporary bands at the time, or ones I considered, similar, maybe Killing Joke, Bauhaus, were all having hits, and they were all going on Top of the Pops.
Yeah.
And I'd already been on once with another band, Theatre of Hate, briefly.
Yes.
For 5 minutes, I'd been on Top of the Pops. And we were doing great as a band, The Cult, but we hadn't had that hit. And luckily, Sanctuary became that, but that was just happenstance. So when we went to Beggars Banquet and said, we want to use this guy, Steve Brown, they went, well, look, why don't you just go in and do a single and see how it goes? So that was how we did Sanctuary as a one-off.
But you already knew that in your little pool of songs for this album, that was a standout.
Yeah. We had some gut feeling
Just talk
on
us
it.
through, while we're on it now, talk us through the writing of that and how that
Well,
happened and how you knew that was a special moment.
Honestly, I didn't. I thought it was hooky, and it was something that particular song, I know I had the music. It was just something I had, and it just started with the snare hit, like that drop. It didn't have that meandering.
It starts on the four, doesn't it? It starts on
Yeah.
that, which is
But for
always
me,
so great.
But when I went back to listen to this, when I think of that song, I remember what I thought was the hook, and I still do when I listen to it, and it's that acoustic guitar.
Well,
Gang.
That's the last thing that was done on the recording.
But
was
it's like the on Creep.
It's
That's Steve Brown, 100%
It's the riff
Steve
for me.
Brown.
Yeah. I love
I love
the
guitar
riff.
player. Guys, guitar player union there, Gary.
I'm talking about
Go on,
guitar as well.
just take me through. Did you start? You came up with that on your own, I guess.
Yeah, you know what? When you're in a band and it's early, and especially in the days when people didn't record your stuff and put it out on the internet, you used to just be pretty free, and you'd be in rehearsals and come up with a riff, and somebody'd sing, and there's like a golden era of creativity. So you were either on the road, in rehearsals, anywhere but in your flat, because that was usually terrible because you were broke. So you wanted to be anywhere other than at home. So you were just constantly busy. And that just came out of a writing thing and trying to find ourselves. I do remember, though, and at the time, Ian went, not a little bit kind of big country-ish. I think it was a bit, because we had the same...
they were the same
I mean,
nemesis,
and I love Stuart Adamson from the Skids.
Yeah.
They were the big band.
Yeah, they were.
And we were the little band in the management.
It's not the Celtic.
No,
thing.
it's not. It's not that. But then, of course, the connection, ironically, was we ended up getting Mark Brzezicki to play drums on the album, but not on the single. That single was our drummer, Nigel, and we recorded it at Olympic in Barnes.
So it's before he went.
Yeah, it's before Nigel. We had to let Nigel go because he got a...
It was a video that was when he didn't turn
Yes.
up, wasn't it? That's the start, yeah.
Yeah, so you know, we go to Olympic in Barnes, we record the single. Nigel's definitely got some personal issues, and we're struggling a bit with him. And which is sad because he was in Theatre of Hate with me. He's like my mate. We loved him, but it's that drugs thing. So we get through the recording. We record at Olympic, which was unfeasibly expensive and very low tech. It looked like the Star Trek Now I think it's a Helios. I'm not really.
It's a
technical
club now,
No, it's a
isn't
club
it?
now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
it's-
now,
it's-
but in the day it had these these kind of
Well, in the
ancient.
80s it got all done up, but before, because it was basically the Stones and the Zeppelin studio.
Well,
from the
that's why we
60s, wasn't
went.
it? So it
We
was-
had complete delusions of grandeur. We were like, we want to go where Free recorded.
In that
where
great
Zeppelin-
rock and roll city, Barnes.
Yes, in Barnes. Well, it's a lot of rock stars end up there. You'd be
Right, that's
surprised,
true.
including Steve Jones. But they, you can't underestimate a village pond cycling distance to Hammersmith.
It's over the Hammersmith Delta.
That's it. It's in the Delta. Barnes is in the Delta. If you actually
Okay, yeah.
Anyway, so we did it. Now, everybody else was trying to go super high tech, right? I mean, in 1985, when that single came out, to my recollection, there were only 2 what I would call guitar-orientated hits in the chart. And one was Would I Lie to You by the Eurythmics, and the other one was Sanctuary. I don't remember too much. I might be wrong, but there didn't seem to be
Which
much.
gave you a kind of in, really.
A little bit, because everything was very synthy and everybody
yeah,
wanted to
yeah,
be
yeah.
a robot.
Well,
and
yeah,
Smiths would
or
have been.
guitars that
there was,
sounded like
but there wasn't a
Nile
lot.
Rodgers.
There was
yeah.
a little bit.
But then again, that's a whole different.
Yeah, it's different conversation. But it felt that we got extremely lucky.
Do you feel, though, there was an audience that were missing out at that time?
It was. I think it was very.
Hang on. Turn it off.
It is. It's on airplane.
It's
Is his doorbell going?
yeah, that's it. That's your Ring camera. So yeah. Anyway, so
He's got a camera in his ring.
it
Sorry,
was.
let's go.
It was. We done anyway. So we did. Yeah. So
No, sorry,
I
Billy.
think
I go
that-
back. Was there an audience that was kind of waiting for you?
I think there was an incredibly large underground, people dressed in black and had spiky hair audience, goths, if you will. Batcave crowd. There was a scene, a subcultural thing, but I think we just opened it out a bit. And
Yeah, because that was too narrow, right?
it was pretty much maxed out. And there were a lot of bands sort of operating in that sphere. It never got to a wider audience.
What we talking about, sort of Flesh for Lulu. Is it that?
Oh,
that
there was the
time?
Specimen, Flesh for
Specimen,
Lou.
yeah.
I mean, there was hundreds of bands. Ghost Dance.
just
It was a
similar.
northern. It was a funny thing because it was considered northern.
Was it?
Yeah, like Goth. Well, a little bit. I think it was
Just
considered
think
like.
about the roots of it for a second. Yeah, because Theatre
Yeah.
of Hate were quite
Well,
early,
because
weren't they?
you mentioned those bands. It's funny because Johnny and I have been texting about this morning because
Right.
I remember, like when you were in Theatre of Hate, there was this. It was like a miniature scene. I was hanging out with Killing Joke.
Yeah.
At the time, and there was Killing Joke, Theatre of Hate, Bauhaus.
Yeah, they were the bands.
That-
yeah.
that
Well,
was- there was this kind of
I
mini-
suppose Joy Division, went two ways. Either
Yeah.
you could follow the electronica of New Order,
yeah.
or you could go the other way
And keep it with like organic instruments
Exactly.
and not.
You know.
That was the route we went. I mean, I personally like Joy Division. For me, was a band that I didn't get into till much later. I knew him in Manchester, but that's a little diversion. The path, but back to Manchester in like '78.
Oh man, there's so much. Yeah.
But I knew them. But yeah, that was the kind of peer group of bands was like Bauhaus, Theatre of Hate, we just kind of. Everybody started having hits. I mean, Theatre of Hate had a hit with Westworld, which is why I ended up on.
But you didn't play on the single, did you?
No, I didn't play on the album. I got the true story, honest story is, I was working in Johnson's on the King's
but
Road.
You must have served me, man.
Oh,
I lived in that.
I lived to surf. I was great. I was like Nigel Tufnell. Do you wear brown, sir? I can do all. I was
So
selling
I used
them.
to get all the mod stuff from there.
Yeah,
It was
I was
brilliant.
just that's my big goal. I was like, I got to get a job at Johnson's. That's where all the rock stars go. I was working at a hospital as a porter, Highgate, the Whittington.
Whittington, yeah.
Right, me and Andy Blade from Eater. That's another name from the distant.
Wow.
Yeah,
Were you
well,
wheeling around dead bodies? I can just see
yes,
that. Yeah.
yes.
How goth.
The short answer, yeah.
and
And even
yes.
better, body parts. That's even more goth. What you don't want to know is what happens when somebody goes under a train.
Oh.
Well, you get body bags, don't you?
Yeah.
Think about it. Do the math.
No.
Anyway, let's get.
More of a tureen.
Yeah, we got
Just
goth.
great for lyric writing, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah. It's like, whoa. Anyway, that was the job I had, you know. So I was working there, and it was afforded me a lot of time off to try and be in bands and do weekend gigs and this and that. And then, but my big goal in life was to work at Johnson's because that's where all the rock stars were. So I eventually managed to bother them enough to give me a job. And I got a gig at Johnson's. And by working at Johnson's a couple of days a week, I started just meeting a lot of people and was going to clubs all the time.
Sorry, just backtrack. You should tell people what Johnson's is because,
Okay.
So, its relevance.
Yeah, well, Johnson's was kind of ended up being the rock and roll clothier of the King's Road. You know, it was round the corner from.
It was on the corner. There was a whole, you had World's End.
Yeah.
Then you had Johnson's, and across the road you had Anthony Price, and then just down at the end of that block you had Robot.
Yeah, Robot with the shoes.
When was Boy?
Yeah.
Boy was later.
Boy was kind of out of the picture. Boy was much further down. And it was already, Boy was just sort of doing bondage trousers and stuff still.
Boy at that point had become a bit of like where the third, fourth generation punks were getting their gear from. So Boy wasn't really in the equation. We'd kind of evolved. I mean, like yourself, I think it's occurred to me that, our generation was the fans of punk who learned to play, and we didn't want to sound like a bad version of the bands that we thought were great. So we were searching for our own sound. And, for me, I ended up, getting a rockabilly haircut and playing a Gretsch because I saw the Stray Cats and thought they were the best live band I'd seen since the Pistols. And
but can I say, by the way, just with that, with the Gretsch thing, because I remember there was a similarity between you and Geordie. Because he had the Gibson.
Well, that was part of that journey. Yeah, Geordie from Killing Joke.
Yeah, there's another. It was Matthew
Ashman from Bow Wow Wow.
Because he was.
I was at the gig at the Roller. Their first gig they did because I ended up being friends with Lee, the bass player. But
Lee produced my first solo album.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Anyway, he's great. So I went. They played the Roller Rink in Hammersmith, and they played about 6 or 7 songs twice. I remember seeing that big white guitar and thinking, I must have one. I'd seen one years before with my high school band because half the band were into like Neil Young and Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah, Neil played one, didn't he?
Right, and the big white Falcon. And me, I was looking at more like Malcolm Young in AC/DC. Sylvain had one on the New York Dolls album.
Yeah, right, of course.
And so, it was. But anyway, to me, it was just this mythical.
Just to tell people about this guitar, it was from the 50s, and Gretsch built it almost like one of those showroom cars, didn't they?
Yes.
Yeah, it was like a classic rhinestone guitar.
Literally like the over-the-top Cadillac of guitars.
Yeah.
Really, it was just an extreme white thing, and I just ended up wanting to get one. And I think it was just in a way, like you mentioned, Geordie.
You definitely weren't a shoegazer.
No. Although I was, if you see pictures of me when we first started, I was terrified. I'm like frozen. Like with the call, the early Death Cult and the call. I didn't move around much at all.
But also what's funny is listening to the Death Cult stuff, the earlier stuff,
is
what a new wave guitar player you are. Do you know what I mean? In terms of sound, 'cause I guess everyone had that. So, you haven't got there's not the dirt and everything. It's like
Theatre of Hate. That my time in Theatre of Hate taught me a lot about a different way of approaching the guitar. It was more like looking for an Ennio Morricone kind of because the riffs in Theatre of Hate, like the connection from Joy Division, New Order, the riffs were really coming from the bass, and they were like tribal drums, and the guitar was meant more rhythmic and a little bit more Ennio Morricone. There was definitely no blues.
Kind of cowboy western movies.
Yeah, it was spaghetti western,
spaghetti western
type thing, and of course that all came together with the Westworld track. But I learned a lot.
I suppose John McGeoch from Susie.
Yeah, he was
such an influence.
He was amazing. Yeah,
in a way, he was the beginner of it all, wasn't he? That sort of
I think so.
Fripp of new
flanged arpeggio style.
Yeah. He was definitely the governor of that for sure.
Yeah.
He definitely got everybody in those early band shoes.
Spellbound.
Yeah, it was incredible.
But also then the American thing coming in, right?
Yeah, that's where we started in California, and we've ended up coming back to England. We just.
Because Rockabilly was having a revival, wasn't it?
In London at the time, and I saw the Stray Cats.
Who were amazing.
If you ever saw them at that time, it was literally unbelievable how good they were. I saw them at a Hell's Angel benefit at the Rainbow in Finsbury Park.
Did you? I saw them at the Lyceum, and it was like, and they were fun. But it was the thing. But the Hell's Angels, it was like their Altamont. Hell's Angels were doing the security, or whatever, and the Hell's Angels were over there, and everyone was just looking.
Were
at
they
the
sort of Hell's
floor
Angels from Swindon, though?
Yeah, but even so, no, when someone rode a bike into the Lyceum, and it was no one dared look at anyone. It was really horrible.
They got involved in that.
Yeah.
Which, was questionable, but it was fun. It was. I thought there was such a good live band.
But I think what I'm saying is, I think the fact that Americana rockabilly stuff was coming into new wave, merging with what had happened with Susie, say, and creating a new sound, gave you the kind of style musically that would take you back to America and have a success there.
Yeah, ultimately it did, yeah. It kind of, because I never really, like the kind of thing, I've listened to your show a little bit and I've heard a lot of people talking about the Manchester sound and the raincoats and the, and the all that. And that was never my Manchester. My Manchester wasn't that at all. I left Manchester in just the beginning of 1979. But my Manchester, that was just beginning to happen. The people I hung out with, we were all into like Iggy and the Stooges, Patti Smith, New York Dolls,
Yeah,
so let's go back to these two young lads in Wythenshawe. I think in a way, I like to think that you and Johnny, Marr, you're like the Beck and Page of post-punk.
Who's who? Hopefully I'm Page. I think Johnny's...
just in the mates,
very much so, yeah. It's...
How did you meet?
South Manchester... Basically, there's a suburb called Wythenshawe in the south of Manchester, near the airport. And they moved everybody from central Manchester. They cleared out all the old Coronation Street type houses in Hume and moved everybody to this garden suburb that they built called Wythenshawe. And that's where I grew up. And Johnny grew up there, same thing. His parents moved out. And he used to just come and watch my... he went to a different school. He went to the Catholic school. But my high school band, everybody had one. He used to just come and watch us rehearse. And he would sit... He's about 3 years younger than me, and he just would come and sit we'd rehearse in my mate's parents'... I think it was the hallway. And he just come and hung out, and that's how I knew him. So, going back...
Do you want a quote? I've got a quote here from him this morning. We've been friends since we were kids on the estate playing Les Paul and Strat copies. I remember seeing him as a Mott the Hoople fan. I'm not going to do his accent, he'll kill me. And the day after he saw the Pistols in 76, he kept saying, they're really good, John. There's a couple of things. He said, we even saw Sergio Aguero's goal together.
Yeah, we were. Yeah, so yes, we did. That was emotional.
Ask him about sneaking into the Free Trade Hall and the Apollo.
Well, that's what we used to do. And I think we used to... So I'll tell you one little story. So Iggy Pop's doing the...
Just one?
Okay, one story. Manchester Apollo, we've all played there. That side lane where everybody parks and the buses are. What we used to do was... There was a girls' toilet that had a little window in it. And we used to put the smallest member of the entourage, who didn't have... Johnny, because he's quite a slight fellow... And wait until the intro music came on and the lights went down, bung him in through there. He'd run out of the girls' toilets into the hall and push open the fire doors.
Classic.
Where four of us are
I've run in before.
We'd just run in and we'd just shuffle in next to all the people. And because the band had just come on, nobody could stop us. And that was the... I actually went and looked for that window. It's still there, but it's now heavily gridded and gated and bolted and guarded. But so we used to do that.
What gigs do you remember?
Oh, that was the Iggy Pop one where he wore the German helmet and put candle wax and peanut butter, and he had the skateboarders' knee pads. Oh, everybody. I mean, I would go and see literally any band.
Thin Lizzy Jailbreak Tour?
Absolutely.
Come on.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I wasn't old enough to see Bowie or Alice Cooper on Schools Out, Bowie on Ziggy. I was not old enough for that. I was more like 75, 76, 77. Early Queen.
Yeah.
I saw The Who's last tour with Keith Moon at King's Hall, Bellevue.
Yeah. I saw that one at Hammersmith.
Mott the Hoople. It broke my heart. I had tickets for Mott the Hoople when Ronno was going to play, and they cancelled the tour. It was at Manchester Palace. And I think I have the tub. It broke my heart because I never got to see... I saw Ian Hunter's Overnight Angels.
Right, yeah.
And I, too, have seen Woody Woodmansey's U-Boat.
Come on!
So you never saw Mick Ronson?
I saw him years later in Vancouver when he was playing with Ian Hunter.
Oh, yeah.
and we were recording Sonic Temple, and Bob Rock took us to see the show. And to my everlasting regret, I didn't want to bother them backstage. I didn't want to be that guy, because at the time we were quite.
No, I know the feeling, but you know
I
what?
don't want to
Maybe
be that
might
guy
be a
going
cooler
backstage.
Memory. Maybe it's cooler to just have the memory of not being
It
that
was when
guy.
Ronno was playing the Blue Telecaster.
Oh right,
He'd gone to that, and you know, Bob
because
Rock.
the other guitar, the famous one, broke. At one point,
And it's apparently in somewhere in Newcastle.
No, I followed it. I did a little documentary on TV.
Oh,
about
really?
it. Yeah, and it's owned by an accountant in Monaco.
Oh, really?
And when I got there to see it, and he showed it to me, it didn't look the same because, I mean, you know, it's a black guitar that's been stripped at the front. It's a custom.
I'm
right?
familiar with
right?
that.
You
yes.
know all of that, right? But just for our audience, but it's been completely laminated.
Oh.
And it was fixed because he broke it during a Hunter tour, and the neck broke.
Right.
And then when he got it fixed, he had it laminated at the front.
Yeah.
He signed it to sell it.
Right.
Of course, because it's on this new laminate.
Right.
It just is all faded, so you can barely see his neck.
yeah.
But it is the piece of wood.
That's the actual
piece of wood.
guitar.
It's the pickups and everything. And I got to play it.
Oh, wow.
I got to play a bit of Slaughter on 10th on it,
Oh.
which was amazing. You know,
Yeah,
for me.
he was incredible. But I also shout out Mick Ralphs.
Yeah.
Shout out Mick
Yeah.
Ralphs, because he never gets the credit.
Absolutely.
So we're talking about your guitar influences.
Yeah,
here, right?
Just Les Paul guys, and while we're talking about Ronno and stuff,
Yeah.
it was Mick Ralphs too was an incredible influence. All those hooks that he wrote.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the things I like to do.
And then in Bad Company, obviously.
Yeah, and then Bad Company, similar vibe. It was like he wrote good hooks, he got good riffs. I mean, you know, Feel Like Making Love, it's like, you know, it's one of the all-time best, you know, overplayed rock riffs of all time. But he wrote some incredible melodies. If you listen to all those Mott the Hoople singles, you know, Roll Away the Stone, Honolulu Boogie, all the way from Memphis. I mean, a lot of Mick Ralph's hooks were incredible.
Yeah.
Is he play? And he plays the guitar at the intro of All the Young Dudes.
Yeah,
Because it
that's
sounds like he's almost copying Ronson, doesn't it?
Well, he probably
It's got
copied
that-
the same vibe.
Yeah.
I mean, that was because that was a Bowie song, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But anyway, I like just to shout out to Mick, because he was a
I know,
lovely
he's
guy,
lovely.
and
You know,
I like
that-
Mott the Hoople because they were real outsiders, and they were a bit like the three-legged dog that got kicked around, and they never quite made it. And then Bowie saw the value in them, because they wanted to be like this kind of progressive Bob Dylan-esque.
That's
and they
right.
were just
Yeah,
they
yeah.
made some truly terrible albums with a few good songs, and then it all changed. And I just loved Ian Hunter. I read the book, which I'm sure you've read, and that also changed my life. Reading Diary of a Rock and Roll Star. I didn't want to be Ian. I wanted to be Mick Ralphs, going to guitar shops and buying old guitars, and
But
know.
that's also it. It talks about the lifestyle, didn't it?
Yeah, that's
book.
what I meant. It was like, and then you're like thinking, be careful what you wish for, because ended up it's kind of what I do.
So let's go to that place then in 1976
Right,
when
yeah.
the Free Trade Hall.
Okay.
There's already been a buzz because they've come to town, haven't they,
Right.
the Pistols,
Yeah.
and they're supported then by who on that first gig?
So the first gig, no, I don't know if anybody supported them. The first one, there was 40
But it was
people.
arranged by Howard Devoto. wasn't it?
Yeah, and Pete Shelley arranged
No, I
the.
thought that was the second gig.
No, the first one was arranged
Buzzcocks
by
played
them.
the second gig.
Yeah,
Right.
and they didn't. That's the one that's in 24-Hour Party People, the movie. And there was about 40 people there, much hipper than me. I was 15. I hadn't even done my mock O-levels. And I'd heard about the Pistols. I'd seen the thing in Sounds magazine, where in that marketplace in Soho, Johnny had got some chewing gum and he'd stuck it on a picture disc of the Beatles and the spiky hair and the whole thing. And I was just, the imagery, because they were just like nothing else.
Yeah.
And I was
Clockwork
like,
Orange meets Dickens.
yeah, it was like otherworldly. No, really, it was otherworldly. I was like, what is this?
I've got a slightly different memory of that picture. As I thought it was a grape.
Oh, I
thought
thought
it
he
was a
was.
squash
I thought
grape.
he'd pulled
So I thought he
chewing
was
gum
holding
out of his
grapes,
mouth, because these were picture
Johnny
discs.
doesn't eat grapes.
You know, it was,
No, but you'd be amazed. They're all a lot more hippie than, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Brown Billy Idol with his brown rice. Come on.
yeah, there you go. And but anyway, so I saw that, and then, in fairness, though, the other reason I wish I was hipper than I am, but the local band where I was from Winshaw was Slaughter and the Dogs. They were from my estate.
Which is a Bowie type name, isn't it?
It
Slaughter,
was.
10th Avenue meets
It was. They were a
Diamond Dogs.
Bowie band.
And Johnny said the guy used to do a fake Cockney accent when he talked.
They went bad at the singer, and I'm still very, very good friends with Mick Ronson, the guitar player, and they were our local band. So you look up, they were like, Slant the Dogs, that's incredible. They do real gigs. Because before punk, I don't know what it was like for you, but I there was no way I was ever going to make music a living. It was just a hobby that.
No, there were 5 bands.
Yeah, yeah.
And they all
And you
had
were never gonna-
planes,
and
and
you
I
were
was
never
never
gonna be
invited
one.
on the
Yeah.
plane. I was never going to get on that
Absolutely,
plane.
yeah.
And Zeppelin, you're going to Nebworth. I'm like, where's Nebworth? What's that? I've got tuppence to get the bus into town in Manchester, before the night bus rates came in. There was this other world, and that was fine. I wasn't hating on it.
I played in a band with older guys who had no ambition to be successful.
No, there wasn't that ambition, and that's. I know it sounds to a lot of people, oh God, he's going to say it, but it did change everything and made it possible. Punk rock, for whatever its pluses and minuses, it made it suddenly.
Yeah.
It really, really did.
People size. That was my favorite.
Yeah.
It's suddenly got people size.
Yeah, you could go to loads of gigs, and it wasn't. Anyway, so 76, and Slaughter and the Dogs were playing. So I thought, right, well, it's this band, the Pistols, and we're going. So 5 of us went for my school. It was the second gig. It was a month later, and the Buzzcocks actually had got rehearsed and opened up. So they were the first band I saw that was a punk band. And Shelley had the sawn-off Woolworths guitar. He'd sawn off half of the guitar, and he had this amazing. He had those H&H valve sound amps, which we're all familiar with.
Yeah.
And he had this great sound. And
Narrator's voice. They didn't sound like valves.
No, they sounded like something. They sounded like the Skids. Is what they sounded like. But anyway, it was a great gig. Slaughter and the Dogs did their thing. There was a massive fight between people in the audience because punk gigs were pretty violent. So it turned out. Go figure.
Right.
They were selling pint bottles of Newcastle Brown, glass bottles in the thing. So, and there was apparently there was 37,000 people at that gig. To me, it looked about 300, maybe 250. It seemed like a scout hall. I can't even remember. Nobody's ever shown me a picture of, but it looked like an amateur dramatical mini hall.
So just remind people who's actually in there.
Who's in there?
Yeah, it went on to become famous.
Well, I'm not entirely sure. I'm sure
Morrissey, right?
Morrissey was there.
I know the list.
Bernard.
Yeah, all those guys, yeah.
Ian Curtis, Mick Hucknall.
I saw him, Frantic Elevators, supporting the Fall at Rafters.
Okay.
I saw Mick Hucknall when he was in the Frantic Elevators. He had an anorak. Well, everybody had an anorak. I don't remember. I was 15. I hadn't done my O-levels. We just went...
But Steve Jones was amazing, right?
Yeah, and I think Johnny put a cigarette out on his arm. He was just amazing. But the Buzzcocks were amazing. Slaughter and the Dogs were good.
Yeah,
the whole thing was just like, wow. But to everlasting shame, 3 of the guys left before the Pistols because of the violence.
It was a fight.
Because it was a massive fight. And I was like, I can't... I'm not particularly a tough guy, but I was not going to miss seeing the Sex Pistol over a brawl. But a load of my mates, who I still know, decided to go home.
Oh, God.
And apparently Pratt Travers band was playing in town on the same night, and another friend of mine chose Pat Travers over.
Was that the kind of ground zero for you at that moment? Then was it like, oh God, I'm going to reinvent my record collection and my style?
To an extent, it was a little bit of a painful process. I'm sure I did what you did.
Yeah.
I did keep a couple of guilty pleasures.
Yeah.
Free, Bad Company were a little hard to let go.
Thin Lizzy always worked, didn't they? Thin Lizzy
were cool. Bebop Deluxe.
Bebop
Another
Deluxe,
amazing
of
band,
course.
another amazing guitar
Bill
player.
Nelson.
Yeah. Still to this day.
Must
Bill
get him on,
Nelson.
actually.
He'd be an amazing guy to talk to. His
Yeah.
guitar playing still to this day is phenomenal. That was my first exposure. We knew a kid at my school, which is called Brookway High School, and one of the teachers went to college with Bill Nelson, and they brought in his album In a Northern Dream on Mushroom Records. And we were like, this person knows a person who plays guitar and has actually made a vinyl record. It was like, you are a god to us.
Yeah.
That's...
Because with Bill Nelson and Bebop Deluxe, you've got that art rock thing happening then, haven't you?
Yeah. They were great. A couple of albums were super strong. Made in Heaven, was such a powerful... Those are like, if I get a snapshot of my youth, it was like the beginning of Can't Get Enough by Bad Company. Literally, the intro. Still, the hair stand up on. I don't know why. Made in Heaven, because of the little clever thing he does with the plectrum, the scratching thing, and there's these little snapshots of things that have all Violence by Mott the Hoople, the wah-wah break in the middle, where Mick does that thing where he hits the wah-wah and does the. And there's like, and at my age now, those are little snapshots that came into.
For me, the movie Clockwork Orange would be added into that as well, because that was so influential, wasn't it? I mean, even songs like Violence probably only came because of that film.
Entertainment for young people. I remember going to see Man Who Fell to Earth, and they would only show it at night time, and those kind of movies. That was
which would be on for months.
Oh yeah,
like, you know,
every Saturday night.
Late
night
showing.
The
Prisoner.
All of it. It was so that was what we did for fun.
So
before
then
cell
you moved
phones.
to London. Then did
Well,
you move?
no, wait. Before
there's another
that.
bit.
No,
All right.
No, there's a lot before.
I've got to get into that.
There's
all
a
right.
certain Stephen.
Of course.
I mean,
yeah, there
come
is.
on,
All right.
of
Yeah, I got.
course.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about the great lost. You know,
I kind of got to get it in. Yeah, I got to get it in. All right. So, Stephen was a guy who was going to all the gigs. He had kind of curly hair. He's a funny guy. And he was like writing for the NME. He was submitting local reviews. And he was the self-proclaimed head of the New York Dolls fan club. And me and my bunch of yobbo mates in Wythenshawe were trying to put a band together. And we thought, you're always looking for a singer, right? You know, guitar players are tenor penny, aren't they, really? To be honest.
Yeah, you want a front band, don't you?
Yeah, if you want a band, you need the guy, right? And we thought, what about this guy, Steven? You know, he likes the Dolls. He knows the Stooges. Anyway, so cut a long story short, me and him did a band. And
did you encourage him then? Were you the first?
I was. I believe I was the first person that wrote songs with Steven, as he was called him.
And you can't remember what he sang like.
Yes, slightly. He was a bit. His voice then was a little bit. I've got this off. I was so nervous myself playing. I don't remember, but I do know a few things. We did 2 gigs.
We haven't said actually what his name is.
No.
Steven Morrissey.
Morrissey.
So he turned out to be Morrissey. So we did 2 gigs. One was, it was the Rabid Records anniversary party, which was Tosh Ryan, who was a big South Manchester label, who did Jilted John, Slaughtering the Dogs. And there was a band, the other Wythenshawe band was called the Nosebleeds. In fact, they were called Ed Banger and the Nosebleeds, and they had a pretty interesting song called I Ain't Been to No Music School. The harmonics at the beginning, quite challenging. There's like this Steve Hill.
Because he had been to music school.
Because it was Vinnie Riley who became the Durruti column. So anyway, so
He was quite a prog head.
all right. So I'm gonna get this quick now. So I'm at school. I think I've done my O levels. I'm in the 6th form, doing terribly, and I get the gig as a lookout for the Fly Poster gang, because we would get the Red Star parcels that would come up from Euston on British Rail, and we would be the gang who put them up in the Manchester area, right? And I was just a little likely lookout for the cops. So the guy with the bucket of paste, the guy with the posters in a dodgy transit.
This is the movie.
And they did, and I'd be the guy at the corner if the anyway. The bass player from the Nosebleeds was in that gang, right? So one day he says to me, "Hey Billy, you play guitar, don't you?" And I was like, "Yeah, you know, I can play a bit." He said, Vinny's left the band." I was like, oh, do you want to audition? So I was like, sure, right, you know, great. So and he said, if you can play I Ain't Been to No Music School, you've got the job. So I go home and I'm trying to work out how on earth he's doing these harmonics. You know, I mean, I was just trying to be Johnny Thunders, and this was a whole other level, you know, of like... And,
frippery.
Yes, literally. and so I somehow managed to learn the COD version of this. I go round to his house. I'll never forget it. It was you know, when before council houses were commonly sold, some people used to just paint them and put carriage lanterns on them. And it is family, but I thought, these must be middle class. They've got carriage lanterns on the council house. Went in, he had a corgi dog sitting in the kitchen. And and he kept, and all this dog did was fart, because he'd been eating raw meat, and he's going, right, have you got it? And I went, da-da-da. So I played it, it was, right, you're in. So it was Toby, the drummer, who went to play with the Blue Orchids and with Nico. Pete Crooks, the bass player, and me. That great. When's the next gig? And he went, and as I was leaving, he said, oh, by the way, what I didn't tell you was Eddie Garrity, the singer, he's left as well. So we don't actually have a singer.
Eddie Garrity, he wasn't related to Freddie, was he?
No, not at all. No. So sadly, he just passed away recently. Right. Eddie Garrity's a whole other story.
Yeah.
When he became Ed Weiner.
Yeah.
But I'll leave it right there. But so I'm 16 years of age. I've no idea what I'm doing. I'm suddenly in a band that's got a gig, and we haven't got a singer.
Did you have to learn the B-side, Fascist Pig, by the way? It was called that, wasn't it?
Yes. Is that the one that goes, I think you're it, you think you're it? Oh, no, that's the Slant the Dog song. No, anyway, no.
No, but I just love that it's like, I ain't been to no music school, backed with
Fascist Pig. We didn't get that far, and I'll tell you why. Because I got Morrissey, Steven, to come down and audition. Because I said, now, contextual, this is 1978. What was happening, I think you'll remember, it was more like Oi. So it was like the Cockney Rejects, Sham 69. Punk had kind of transmogrified. The Pistols had split up. It was that grey area where there was a lot of these bands coming up. There was a lot of violence, skinheads, and there was the Rock Against Racism side. There was the Oi thing. And neither of that interested me at all. I would rock and roll. I wanted to rock and roll, that's what I wanted to play. So anyway, so Steven auditions and but what he did was he just says to me, we can't play any of those Nosebleed songs. I was like, what? It's like, and he's like, so we wrote 6 or 7 songs that I remember together and we rehearsed them. And credit to Pete and Toby, 2 complete chances. Wow. Come into their band, which actually had released a single and done some gigs. And we're like...
became a writing partnership.
Yeah, we're not going to do any of your songs. We're going to do a couple of covers and we're going to do... And that's what we did.
What about the audience? Were they happy with that?
It was so much of a blur. I was terrified.
So was that Morris's first gig?
Yeah, would have been the Rabid.
And there's no record of these songs.
I heard somebody... No, I know somebody had...
I just know what they sounded like.
Somebody had a cassette. I heard the rumour that somebody... The second gig we did was at the Ritz in Manchester and we were supporting Magazine.
By the way, was Johnny there?
I don't know. I don't know if he was there. It's likely he was.
Right. So you're supporting Magazine with John McGill, right?
Yeah. And because Morrissey knew Linda, who did the artwork for the Buzzcocks.
We were speaking about Linda the other day.
Yeah,
she's got Linda Sterling. She's got a show coming up at Hayward, isn't she?
Yeah.
So I just read about that this morning.
So she was the connection, and we got that gig supporting Magazine, and those are the only 2 gigs. In short, basically, just to end that story, quickly, what happened was, I basically got kidnapped by Mick Ronson to join his band because they had a record deal. They were managed by a guy called Ken Pitt, who you might know from Bowie.
Yes, right.
And in the time I was living in my parents' house on the Dole, and they said, right, record deal, DJM Records, it was like Elton John, managed by Kemp Pitt, weekly wage, flat in London. It was Hendon, but I didn't know.
Oh, right.
They said London, it was Hendon, but you know what I mean? Loosely London. But
South Endon.
Yeah, but whatever.
It's a tube.
So hot.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So so basically what I did, that's what happened anyway. If anybody's remotely interested in that, somebody made an indie movie called England Is Mine, and that basically covers what I've just described. And also me, I think I introduced Johnny to Morrissey outside either the Ramones or Patti Smith gig in Manchester. I did introduce them, but literally, hi, Johnny, this is Steven. And that was that. So that was my thing. And unfortunately for the world, I left Morrissey behind and he met Johnny and happy for everybody, it was a win.
But here's something I'm assuming that the band that you've moved to Hendon with, this is something, this bit of a glaring anomaly, I've always thought, Billy, in your story here. So we got all these bands, you've got the Nosebleeds, you've got Slaughter and the Dogs, you've got Theatre of Hate, and then you've got Studio Sweethearts.
Kemp Pitt, David Bowie.
Okay.
But I'm sure
that's the connect. It was Ken's idea.
But when I hear, but like in the middle,
but he's a much older guy. He was a '60s guy.
Yeah.
But when you hear that name, Studio Sweethearts, I'm just seeing David Cassidy feather cuts.
Oh, it was
and cheesecloth
I'm
shirts.
seeing more glam rock.
It was glam rock. What it was we took
it.
But
again, even for that time,
it was actually quite forward thinking. If you think about what happened and how like your band evolved a few years later, this is like early '79. people were starting dressing a bit more rock and roll. You know, part of the band.
Well, it was a glam revival.
It was a glam thing, and I never liked the name, but.
No, because I still remember being at Johnny's house, right, just hanging out playing records, and him showing me a single, going and playing, going, guess who this is?
Yeah,
Oh, I know. And he said Billy Duffy. I was like, no way.
We have to talk about how you met Ian.
Oh, okay, all right. That's an easy one. I'd gotten Theatre of Hate. I get in Theatre of Hate. Boy George. I'm at a nightclub, which might have been
Because I remember Kirk from hanging out at the Blitz. He was always down there.
Right. I never went to the Blitz, but I think I went to Dial 9 for Dolphin.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
where Pete Townsend had a.
No,
thing,
that was
wasn't it?
that was on Baker Street.
Yeah, but I remember that one. That was Perry.
Club for Heroes.
That was Perry Haynes's.
Perry Haynes's club.
Yeah.
It was at the basement of that hotel.
Yeah.
Yes, that was it.
That's
So,
right.
so I was going out to a lot of the places that were hip because I was working at Johnson's. I could get in because I worked in a good clothes shop, and I knew George because George was DJing. I knew nothing about Culture Club. He hadn't even done that yet. But George, I think George had liked me. I think that's in his book. And we were friends, and he pointed out this guy, and he said, "You're a guitar player, aren't you, Billy?" I went, yeah. I've been in a couple of other bands since then. I've been in a band called Lonesome No More and put out a single. And that was Kula Kakuli, who sang on So Alone. Backing vocals on Can't Put Arms Around Memory, and her sister managed Peter Perrett, and was managed Peter Perrett from The Only Ones.
Yeah.
So there's that South East London, Forest Hill.
And we all love The Only One song, didn't we?
Yeah, you're right,
I mean,
right. So I was kind of getting closer and more in. So I'd done some gigs with The Only Ones and the band Wasted Youth. So I wasn't a complete rookie. I'd done like weekend warrior stuff, 3 gigs, come back to work on the Monday.
You're almost a session player.
I think I just got in because I had a good haircut.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know why they hired me, but I did get hired by a lot of
Did
these
you have
bands.
the Falcon?
No.
No.
Never. I had a cream Les Paul, original. And I think I had, and when I got in Theatre of 8, I had a Les Paul Junior because I could never afford the Johnny Thunders one that was yellow when I wanted it. And I finally got enough money to get together, and I bought a cherry red one, double cutaway. And I got that, and I went from that to a Falcon, which was kind of interesting. It was like from a Mini to a Range Rover, you know, in terms of guitars. But anyway, so I got it. Anyway, I didn't know, and by the way, I had no idea that George even knew Kirk. All I knew was I knew
They had
George.
a relationship, though, didn't they?
Well, apparently that was that whole thing that happened years later that I knew nothing about. And he just said, you should go and talk to him. Because I dressed in a certain way with the rockabilly. I looked like the white socks, the tight Levi's, robot kind of shoes, the quiff. And they were like, he's looking for a guitar player. He's just made a really good album produced by Mick Jones of The Clash. So I just literally I must have had a couple of drinks. I walked over to Kirk and said, "Who'd you looking for a guitar player?" And he looked at me a lot like you're looking at me now. No, he did. If you know Kirk Brandon, and he looked me up and down. He didn't say anything. He went,
terrifying.
it was a little, he gave
I
me,
was always scared of him.
and he's really not that guy. But and anyway, cut a long story short, I got in the band. I auditioned, and 3 songs into the audition, they said, "Can you go out of the room?" Went down to Elephant Castle, that rehearsal place called the Sunday School, with the little junior, and Kirk was playing a single anniversary. But Kirk couldn't do all the guitar parts. That was the point. He was the guitar player singer, but by the time they'd done Westworld, he realised he needed another guitar player.
So he was a Gretsch man as well.
Yeah, he had a Gretsch. So, and he asked me, he was like, "If you get in the band, what guitar you buy?" I went, "I'm going to buy a White Falcon." And that's a true story. And I went out and spent my entire life savings, which was 800 quid, at Orange
that's a lot.
Music.
Back then, that's a lot.
Hey! Like
you
3
were pushing.
Yorkshiremen. Hey!
That's what pushing body parts gets you.
Yeah. You know, I was definitely an industrious little fella. And
Where did you get it? Out of interest.
I think it was Orange Music on Charing Cross
Yeah,
Road.
yeah, yeah,
And they were importing them. I thought, so
So it was a new one.
Well, no, it was this was 81, and the guitar was from 75. So near new. And they were just, and they were bringing them in for California. But originally I got a double cutaway one because I was in a rush. I joined Theatre of 8.
Shit, I got the wrong one.
Literally, I kind of got the wrong one. Ended up getting a double cutaway stereo, which means you have to use a special
lead.
Oh, it was a nightmare. Anyway, whatever. Nobody cares. But it was... so I never got the one I wanted until later. which was the big one, the Matthew Ashman, the big Sil Sylvain,
Yeah.
Malcolm Young one. And then that's the one I kind of became associated with.
Ian.
Sudden Death Cult were this up-and-coming band who I took to be kind of a bit Adam and the Ants influenced in a way. Like
and also had that sort of Burundi
He's
beat
very
kind of
tribal.
thing in
Everybody
there,
was
yeah.
doing
Bow
that.
Wow.
Well, that was interesting because Ian's background with that is actually a lot cool. It's not such an affectation, is it?
No,
it's
not
to
at
do
all.
from when he was in America when he was like 13 and he went to a reservation, didn't he?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there's a genuine bit of background.
Yeah,
to that.
Ian lived in his teenage years in just outside Hamilton, Ontario. So he went to school with Native American. They call them First Nations in Canada. So he just and I think he got a bit of that outsider thing because as an immigrant, they were a bit. He sort of hung with the outsiders.
He still carries that shamanistic vibe, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's got that thing about him. He's he missed punk rock and came back because him and his brother Brian came back to I think probably 79 and came back from Canada where his dad had emigrated because in the 70s things were so bad in England economically. Everybody was moving to Australia, Canada, New Zealand. It was common, if his dad had a skill, and they took the family over there. Anyway, Ian comes back, and he this is a true story, right? People say you're from Bradford. Me and Ian are not from Bradford. Ian, if he's from anywhere, he's from like Heswall in the Merseyside, and he spent time in Glasgow and a little bit of time in Belfast. He's travelled a lot, which is you find common with a lot of singers. I met him. They were just the support band on Theatre of Hate's tour, and I met him at Keele University. Just near Stoke.
And was it immediately, wow, this guy's like stands out from the crowd?
Yeah, me and Stan, the bass player from Theatre of Hate, well, he always, there's this hot support band, let's see what they got.
Yeah.
And I remember watching from the balcony down, and the band come on, there's three of them, they all look pretty like strong, good-looking guys, no singer. Drums start very tribal, this weird, angular, awkward guitar line from Buzz. The bass is like very kind of twangy, and then this thing. And then this guy comes across the stage. He's literally, all I can describe it as is, Daniel Day-Lewis in Last of the Mohicans? He looked like that. He'd made his own pants. He had bells on his moccasins. He's made all this stuff.
Wow.
He had a mohawk, but was like down. That was like, he had all
No one's doing this, right?
Not really. It wasn't like painting two white bits on your cheek and Kings of the Wild Frontier. It was like, he had a loincloth on, like with a belt, like a blanket. That's like how and chaps that he'd made himself. And then, but that was all fine. That was whatever. Then he opened his mouth and this voice came out, and me and Stan looked at each other and were like, what is that? And I remember he said something. My recollection, he said something like, hello, we are Sudden Death Cult, and this one's called The Crow. And those are the first words I ever heard out of his mouth. And then this voice and this dancing and that whole thing he had going on. It was just astonishing. So that was that. Theatre of Hate took Sudden Death Cult under their wings. Sudden Death Cult eventually got, after a lot of problems, finally got signed to Beggars Banquet Records, which is how the cult
Bit of a
ended.
thread here, yeah.
That's the thread. I lent them the Falcon for Fat Man. They were trying to make a single. I remember going to the studio. They had 4 or 5 attempts at coming up with a single, Sudden Death Cult, and the band chemistry was a little challenging, I think, which is hence how me and Ian ended up getting together. I remember going to the studio and they were recording Fat Man on Moya, and Buzz, the guitar player, I lent him my Falcon to do some Falcon-type noises. And Ian was kind of sat outside. He wasn't involved. And I sat with him. I remember sitting on a pool table with him and chatting. And he used to do his lyrics and annotate them like they do. I don't know. You're a lyricist. Do you do little pictures on your? No,
not always.
No, but sometimes they do. Some singers.
Should I?
I don't know. Maybe try it. You might get a whole new album out of it.
Yeah.
But he'd annotated, with like cartoon drawing, like his lyrics. And then they each one had like some kind of like, I guess, John Lennon-esque.
That's right.
Doodles,
Right.
maybe. And I just remember thinking, this is a bit weird because they're all we're all friends, He would come and stay with me and a couple of people in London, in Brixton, which was a little bit of a scene then before it got, the Gap. when Brixton was proper dangerous, and you used to send 3 people out armed to go and get fags from the shop. It was proper. Brixton in 1982 was proper dangerous.
I remember.
And anyway, so basically, I get asked to leave Theatre of Eight by Kirk because I think he's just a bit. I think he was a little unhappy with how the band was going, and he just needed somebody to blame, so I got to blame.
You were too much of a front man for Kirk.
Maybe I was a bit too mouthy, possibly. It was his band, and he wrote all the songs. And I remain a really good fan of Theatre of Eight's, massive fan. So he asked me to leave the band in a van on the way to a gig in Glasgow, and Sudden Death Cult were the support band. So I'm in the van with everybody, the gear, the roadie, everybody, and he's going, I think it's time, you should leave the band. It's not. I said, okay, all right.
Well, in front of everyone?
In the van.
He wanted witnesses.
No, we were chatting, but he wasn't, he was a bit like sad, but a bit adult. And and then they went, but we're not giving you a train ticket back to London. You've got to wait around until after the gig. So...
And go back with them?
Yes. And that's true. That anyway, whatever. But so I go to the gig, and of course I've been starting to hang out with Sudden Death Cult more because they were Northerners, and there was a bit of tension within Theatre of Eight. I wouldn't say Theatre of Eight was the happiest band I'd ever been in, and there was a bit.
It's named.
There was
Theatre
stuff.
of Eight.
So I go in, and they're like, Sudden Death Cult are going, what's up? I said, I've got the boot. They've asked me to leave, and they went, fuck off. It's not good, And I'm like, have a look on stage. My amp's not there. So then they did that gig without me. Kirk did it, but he had to come and ask me how to play the hop because I did write all the guitar parts on the hop. So,
but then you
couldn't you wait it? I mean, it just seems like bad logistics.
Yeah, I mean,
wasn't there a guitar player already in Southern Death Cult? You had to replace though.
Well, no.
Ian left.
Yeah, Ian left the band. So we cut to a year later. I'm unemployed, living in London, working in Kensington Market. Living in Brixton.
Sorry, can I? Where in Kensington Market? What shop?
I was in the basement. I used to work in the Johnsons.
Did you know Mole in Kensington Market? What was the name of that?
I worked in the army surplus thing in the basement, and then there was a girls' clothes shop next door, and she asked me to do a day. I was just hustling for money. I needed, you do what you got to do, and living in Brixton. Then the rent was £15 a month. And Clifton Mansions, it was a very famous... There's a story about that where they just shut it down. It wasn't a squat, it was a housing association place. Anyway, we lived there, and...
a lot of people went through there, didn't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of bands around, Sex Gang Children, loads of people under Two Flags, loads of different bands. Anyway, so I'm there, and I was just about to start a band with Abbo from UK Decay. And he did a band called Furio. And I was just out of work for it, playing, and I just wanted to play. And I liked Abbo, he was a great guy. And I just thought, oh, well, whatever. And Ian Asprey's brother showed up in Brixton and stayed in the flat. And he said, my brother wants to have a word with you. I was like, oh, okay. He said, he's going to come down next weekend. So, true story, Ian shows up next weekend, top hat, overcoat, plastic bag with a change of underpants. That was about it. And he said, I've left Southern Death Cult, and I wanted to know if you'd be interested in doing a band. I was like, yeah, I'm good. I'm in. And that was it. We literally rolled out.
You were writing team immediately?
Immediately that weekend, we wrote 3 or 4 songs.
But Southern Death Cult, they're on the ascendant, aren't they?
Well,
he's walking away from something.
Yeah, he walked
right?
away because he didn't feel... The chemistry within the band members had any longevity. And as I said, they'd had a lot of problems recording their first single. There was a lot of egos in that band and a lot of stuff, and that was their business. But from what I gathered, and you'd have to ask him, but my take on it was that he felt that there was just going to be nothing but trouble within the personalities of the band. And he said he saw me play a Jimi Hendrix riff at a sound check with Theatre of Eight when Kirk Brandon wasn't around, and thought, that's fascinating. Rockabilly haircut, Gretsch guitar, acid rock. Interesting thing. And interesting combination.
Before we go, I just want to ask you as a guitarist, that one thing about how you think you found that sound that is totally Billy Duffy. There was there's a moment.
Just
surely.
trial and error. Trial and error, really. I searching for my own sound, the visual thing with the Gretsch. In terms of a
use of pedals.
honest to God, I never considered myself. I just always thought I was a band guy, and my job was to serve the band, my gang, kind of be a band leader, maybe, if you know what I mean, like lead the band, come up with some riffs that people.
Is that you on the front cover of the third album or fourth album? Is it?
Yeah, it was Sonic
Sonic
Temple.
Temple, yeah.
And that wasn't my choice. That was Ian's choice. However, Ian is actually the whole sleeve. That's his head going back. Nobody noticed that, but yeah.
But at that time, for that album, must be because your sound did, I mean, you've been brilliant.
Well, we haven't even talked about Rick Rubin yet. Do you want?
Yeah,
Because you could probably. I think
Take out
it's
some of
worth
the
it.
I agree.
All right, so I've got the Gretsch. We do the Steve Brown album, Love. We have 3 singles because Steve Brown said, you don't want to be a one-hit wonder. So my biggest achievement, I think, was writing Rain, which was the follow-up, which was like Sanctuary but different, and it had a bit more muscle, hinted a bit more of a chug kind of. And so we did that record, and we went on tour around the world, went to America. I'd started having some success, but it wasn't instantaneous. In Canada, we blew up, bonkers. It was like being Duran Duran, or dare I say, any other band of that nature. Right. I mean, girls coming out of cupboards what is happening? People throwing themselves on. We did it. I mean, we're like.
It's because Canada's more like England, isn't it?
Yeah, they just immediately gravitated to the band. So we sort of had this double duality. We were successful in the UK and Canada, incredibly so. America, we were like underground, cool, played the big cities, did quite well. But the album, it didn't sell super well. It sold okay, but we made a lot of impact with the Love album, I think,
Yeah.
And so, the only place we ever got played on regular rock radio was in Seattle, funnily enough, which comes to pass.
Obviously inspired a whole generation.
I mean, if you've listened to early Soundgarden, I mean, if you've seen the Pearl Jam documentary, it starts with them breaking into a Cult gig. That's the beginning of when they were called Mother Love Bone.
Oh, wow.
When they had the other singer, we were friends with them. And I mean, I'm not claiming it, but I think...
We had Duff on as well, didn't we?
I think yeah.
Well, yeah, we always said that Seattle is America's Manchester.
Absolutely.
Anyway,
very much so. Very much so. So, anyway, so where were we? Okay, so we do that album and we go back in, not being mental, we go back in with Steve Brown again. But Ian's not really happy and centered. I didn't feel he was very apart from the band. He felt like I don't know, it's one of those situations. I don't know. He'd certainly found a significant woman in his life at that point and was spending a lot of time with her. And it's natural, but it felt like the gang was, that story. So, but we did the record and Steve Brown did it and it just wasn't right. We were trying to become a kind of a more heavy rock, like the slightly heavier songs on
Seymour
Love.
is involved, right?
Seymour, but to their credit, all the labels who were involved with the Cult, they always just let us get on with it. They were never...
So did you scrap the album?
Yes. After recording it at the Manor, which was pricey, and mixing it at Townhouse 27, at excruciating volume, we came to the conclusion it wasn't right. We tried to remix one single with Bill Price up at Wessex, and that sounded okay. But me and Ian had heard about.
You've got the shadow of that big hit single behind you.
Yeah, on
you
that
earlier,
album,
right?
and we were trying to move. We were trying to progress as a band, but we hadn't really. It was like one foot in each camp. So anyway, cut a long story short, we had heard of Rick Rubin. We'd heard from a friend in Canada he'd done the Beastie Boys' Cookie Puss, which is basically Back in Black with riff, with a beat. And we met Rick Rubin in New York. And the whole deal was Rick was going to just mix. He said, I'll remix your whole album, but you must let me record one song from the ground up. That was the deal, right? So we said, okay. The record company weren't going to let us re-record a super expensive album again. So we get to New York, we rent all the gear, because it's one track, right? We didn't bring any guitars. Everything was rented, amps, drums, guitars. And then Rick says, ostensibly this is a mix with one fresh track. So he just says to me, which track do you like hate on the album the most? Like, which one really disappoints you from what you thought it? And I remember saying, I think it was this song, Peace Dog. It's like, I don't like this. It's too long. It's there. It's turgid there. And he goes, right, we'll start on that one. And we started with that Rick Rubin methodology, which he's proven, the Rick thing. I believe we were the first band he ever produced that had an organic drum kit, and we went to Electric Ladyland. We set up in the main room and we did multiple old school takes.
And it's guitar, one guitar over there, one guitar over there. It's like the proper old live.
24. But he did hire Andy Wallace to be the engineer. Rick's always used great engineers. He's not stupid. And George Rakoulis was there all the time. Rick and George were like a team.
Right.
And, I would say Rick was the senior partner, but George and Rick were like a literal partner, because George was more musical. Rick's not musical at all.
That's amazing.
He said, could you play one of those like pussy AC/DC English chords there?
Did you gradually break down the whole album?
Yes, we literally deconstructed the album on the spot. I went from a Gretsch with the Roland and the chorus and the echoes, and he was like, well, that's a Marshall, that's a Les Paul, off you go. It was quite traumatic for me, I got to tell you.
And it was a more American sounding.
Yeah. It was an amazing time to be in New York, though, because we, there were Beastie Boys, Slayer were around.
Yeah, but you were
this
kind
was
of
86.
You're
in New York.
ahead. You're ahead of that whole kind of
that's the
basic rock
kind
thing
of thing
that's coming.
Rick saw that rock was coming. He was like, do you like early AC/DC? I went, like them? I've hit Angus's guitar once at the Free Trade. Oh, like AC/DC? And he's like, do you like early Zeppelin? And me and Ian like the early stuff. And he was like, let's make a record. And that's...
Yeah.
And we did it. And then we phoned up the management and the label, and they were on the next plane out, because we said, we were going to remix it. Well, we're actually re-recorded half of it.
Because it was your breakthrough album in America, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's a long-winded story, but it's that's...
And do you still ever see Rick nowadays?
Yeah, absolutely. Last time I saw him, he was jogging on the beach in Malibu. He'd shed a bit of timber, and it's before he was levitating, but he was just, when his feet actually still touched the earth.
Yeah.
No, Rick's great. I've got bad...
He rented my missus' house in London last year, and it was very funny when he came and she was showing him around the house, and he was being all very... and he said, where do you keep the fire extinguishers?
Yeah.
And she went, we don't actually have any. Why? I said, well, it's just that I've had 4 houses burned down.
Yes.
Excuse me?
Yeah, I can believe it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Especially if he's jogging in Malibu.
Yeah.
Just one quick thing. Talking of early Zeppelin, you were there at the Café de Paris when I played with Jimmy Page and the Robinsons.
Yes, you did.
And you said you were going to treasure this moment for your whole life.
And it was.
And
It's still polished. Yeah. It's in my little memorabilia box. I remember.
Thank you, Billy, for coming in. Listen, there's so much. We can get you on forever. Probably,
you are a perfect raconteur. You're literally.
Well, I'm honoured. Thank you. Thank you. I'm truly honoured to be a raconteur. I think what you're doing, my opinion, is basically an oral history of rock and roll. I don't know whether you're aware of it, but if you're not,
it's a service.
That's, to be honest, it is, because I've learned so much from listening to the podcast and stuff.
Wow.
So
Great.
I just like to be able to contribute.
Thank you.
Maybe
man.
I'll do it again.
Thank
nice
you.
To see you again.
We'd love that.
All the best.
Brilliant.
Nice one.
Fantastic.
Oh, mate, that was amazing.
Great. That was great. Really was. That was what this is about.
He's a font.
He's an absolute font. A font. There's several
Of
fonts.
knowledge.
But no, a definitive raconteur, I would say.
Yeah. I just love all that era, that stuff that was happening in Manchester in that late 70s, mid 70s, the beginning of punk. I love all that. The Morrissey story is fantastic. And
We should point out that the fact that you have just been wandering the streets of Manchester with Johnny has probably inflamed that
made
passion.
it seem more exotic.
Yes.
It has. But we must mention that he's on tour. They're going on tour like next month. They are playing South America as part of this 40th anniversary, or whatever it's called, 84-24.
85-25.
85-25 now it is.
Now it is, yeah. And they're playing South America.
The 41st anniversary.
And so tickets are available. Plane tickets are available.
Yeah. But yes, so oh wow, so we're actually recording tomorrow, aren't we? So which will be on next week.
Yeah.
with someone very interesting. Don't forget to subscribe to the Rockonteurs, and that will be fantastic for us. And we must thank Ben Jones, our producer, for Gimme Sugar, and
Subscribe.
It's good night from me.
And good night from them.